Hey, what's up, America? I told you I'd be back with more about Mr. David Lee Mack. Yeah, victim of the KKK murder cover-up in 1979 in Marion County, Florida. Listen, I want to talk today about September 29th, 1979. That was the day of Mr. Mack's funeral, which was held in Cotton Plant, Florida, which was in the church that it was held at. The cemetery where Mr. Mack's body lies at now is within walking distance, maybe 20 yards from the church. Also, I want to tell you that Mr. Mack's home was only about maybe 200 yards away from where the church is and where his body lays now. You know, on September 29, 1979, it was 80 degrees that day. Very, very hot day. It was September. But that's the way the weather is here in Marion County. There have been funeral services all that week for Mr. Mack's his death. And those services were conducted by his classmates and his friends. Well, you know, as I told you, it was 80 degrees that day. It was a small country church with just window air conditions. So, you know, with the fact that everybody was upset because they knew why Mr. Mack was killed. Well, then, see, what that did was, all that did was intensify the heat in the church that day. I imagine it probably got up to maybe 100 degrees inside of that building. You know, your blood pressure going up. Yeah, I mean, actually he was threatening a stroke. That's just how hot it was, and because of the situation of why everybody was there. Miss Mack and her children, they left out of the church before the viewing of the body. They had seen Mr. Mack's body several times. They saw what they did to this man, how they beat him. So they requested to leave out of the church, and they did. They left out of the church, and the doors of the church were closed. They could hear screams, loud crying, because now the world was seeing, and Mr. Mack's friends and family was seeing just what the KKK had done to this man. I tell you, you know, Florida, there's only 3 states. Florida has the 3rd most hate groups in the United States. And Marion County, which is, what we have here is north, central Florida. You have the most hate groups in this area here in Florida. Only California and Georgia has more hate groups than Florida does, and most of the ones in California, they're street gangs. But KKK activity here in Marion County, we have what they call a Confederate hammerskins and the KKK. Listen, the day that they killed Mr. Mack was a very, very, very wicked day. They promised this man that they would kill him. Now, in the process, since we did the last video, I had some documents concerning Mr. Mack. You know, the ones that I showed you that he wrote from the Marion County Jail back in 1979. You can see the letterhead there, Marion County Jail. That's where, you know, he was at on a phony DUI charge. Now, someone broke into the home and stole only these documents. Well, I guess they thought they were still in the originals or the only copy that's on the face of this earth. They're silly. There's plenty more copies of this paperwork all over the United States. So they wasted their time, and you know what? Again, I know who you were. I know exactly who you were that went inside of that home and did what you did. But I know you also went in because you probably went to see if I had dug up any dirt on you or some of Mr. Mack's relatives from out in the Cotton Plant area that did his kids wrong after Mr. Mack's death, because a lot of things were stolen from him and nothing was given to the kids. As I said again, that there's only added an insult to a murder. Now, I'm going to tell you something else too. In the next part of the story, you're going to learn how a mockingbird, yes, a mockingbird, plays a vital part in this quest that we have for seeking justice for Mr. Mack. Now, I'm going to tell you something else, too. Every time I think about Mr. Mack and how he died, it really sends chills through my body, and it has my blood rushing, because I can't believe that they did this. But I'm going to tell you something that's even worse than Mr. Mack being killed because of the skin he was in. Black people here, especially in Cotton Plant, Florida, they don't want me doing this story. Well, a lot of them don't want me doing this story. The people here in Marion County, it's because they're passive. And they fear the KKK. Well, listen, one of the biggest sins in the world is to fear. You're not supposed to fear nobody but God. Don't be afraid of these people. This is what makes them so powerful, because they know that you're afraid. They know that you're going to be passive. They know that black people are not going to stand up and say anything about anything. Whether they can kill your women and your children, your father, your uncle, your brother. It doesn't make a difference. They know you're not going to say anything. You're not going to stand up. You're just going to lay down. And that's one of the worst things in the world, is to lay down. Don't be see, these people are cowards. That's why they dress up in the white sheets and the hoods, because they're ashamed of what they're doing, and they're ashamed and don't want anybody to see who they are doing all this wicked stuff that they did. Again, listen, Mr. Mack did not cut his own head off. The man did not cut his esophagus out of his body. Plain and simple as that. We all know better than that. Now, again, what's so sad is that a lot of black people have told me, why don't you leave this alone? You know, that was old. It happened years ago. Why don't you leave that thought alone that you got in your mind about us leaving this alone? Because I told you in the last video, we're going to get justice for Mr. Mack. We're going to get justice for this man, and you just hold on and you will see. I'm going to tell you something else, too. When I say KKK, I know you're wondering why won't we just stay out of their way. But see, a lot of Klansmen, you see, they're not, as I said, they're not running around with hoods on and white sheets. A lot of them have contact. We come in contact with them in our lives because they're in the different governmental agencies here. Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, this is KKK country. They took this man's life. Now I'm going to tell you something else too that's really sad. You see, Mr. Mack had a girlfriend because he and the former Miss Mack, they were divorced. And this lady had at least 5 or 6 children. And I'm going to tell you what happened. About 5 years after Mr. Mack was killed, they were trapped in a house fire in Chatmire, Florida, which is really Dunellen, Florida, which is really next to Cotton Plant, which I told you before is only about 14 miles difference between Cotton Plant and Dunellen. Still, again, we're in West Marion County. This lady and her children were trapped in the house. They couldn't get out. The room that they were in, there was no window. I understand that. But they never did get out. One child survived, and that was because she stayed with someone else for a weekend, or else she would have been dead too. So let's just go to show you the evil that these men do here. They're very ruthless. Anybody that would just cut somebody's head off, cut their esophagus out of their body, then later go and burn up a home where there's women and children at, then you know these people are very, very wicked and evil. So listen, don't sit back and be afraid. What you should do is find you a cause, even if it is in this situation about Mr. Mack, you know, and step up to the plate. Because you remember what Malcolm X said, if you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything. Now I'm going to show you something. This was Mr. Mack's family. This was the family. You see, they took this man away from his ex-wife and his kids, beautiful kids. Even had a grandson that he's there holding. Tell you something, man. It's hard for these kids to celebrate their father's birthday or Father's Day because, you know, his life was taken away from him. And what they did, again, was very, very wrong. And somebody has to pay. I don't understand why nobody wants me to say anything, but I tell you what, you go out and you kill somebody from 34 years ago, and see when they'll arrest you. See won't you be brought to justice. See won't justice be served. And it'll be served swiftly too. Yes, what I said before, Judge Trammell, he left the bench, came up, sat in the audience, mocked this man, made fun of this man. Judge Trammell's son now is the court administrator of the 5th Judicial